we have a guest with us right now.
We do indeed. It's a huge logistical task to pull something like this off. It had to happen, dare I say, in record time. That's what it feels like because of the different constitutional requirements of ensuring, of course, that we transition smoothly into the next administration. Vincent Magwenya needs no introduction, the presidential spokesperson as things stand, dare I add. Great to see you as always. Thanks for popping by and speaking to us. So what did it take to pull this off? I mean, you have people coming from literally all over the continent, heads of states, and we all know that to accompany people who hold that kind of office in any country is a mammoth task.
Whilst we had some last-minute changes to our planning, because initially we had envisaged that we will host the inauguration on the 22nd of July, which is a weekend, in a much bigger venue, being the Loftus Versfeld, when the Chief of the Constitutional Court, Chief Justice Zondo, set the date for the first sitting of Parliament to Friday. That meant we had to have the inauguration 5 days after the election of the president in the National Assembly. So there had to be some serious adjustments, but the planning has been, going on for months in advance, because regardless of who was going to be the president, there was going to be an inauguration. And so the presidency, alongside multiple other government departments, had the duty to commence with that planning and to make sure that when this day finally arrives, it all comes together and it proceeds smoothly.
And of course, no mean feat getting all of this together for about 20 heads of state that will be here today. So that is very impressive. But today's proceedings, Mr. Magwenya, is of course part of the constitutional imperative in that the president has to be sworn in, and that will be done by the Chief Justice. So just talk to us about that for a moment.
Indeed. Today is made up of, I would say, two elements. One, it's the celebration of our democracy. The second element, which is the main element and the main reason we're here, is for the president to take that oath of office, where he commits himself to obey and abide and protect the Constitution. And that marks the moment in which he's sworn into office. And it marks the moment where the next term begins. And so that's the important and the most solemn moment, if you like, of today's occasion. Obviously surrounded by various elements of celebration, military honors, the cultural program, the luncheon later where he will get to interact with his international counterparts, heads of states that have come to grace the occasion. So, but really, we are here to witness that moment when he takes the oath of office.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, of course, the arrival of the newly sworn-in Speaker, Togo Didiza, stepping in just a few moments ago to a resounding applause there. Mammoth task ahead for her as well. Parliament's configuration, never like it is at the moment in the country's democratic history. So certainly one is thinking very much about what it will take to ensure that Parliament can actually do the work that needs to be done over the next 5 years.
I think when it comes to Togo Didiza, she has the respect of all the parties. So for her, I think it will be a good ride, right? Because even when you listen to the messages of congratulations after the president-elect was elected in the National Assembly, all the parties, unanimously, were very congratulatory. And we know this. We've seen Togo Didiza in the chair before, in capacity as Deputy Speaker. And we know that she's capable, she will do it. But most importantly, she carries the respect of the House. What's, for me, going to be more interesting is what happens to Dr. Anli Lotriet, whether she will receive similar respect or whether there will be needling there. Just to see, because we've seen these things before.
Absolutely,
in Parliament.
yeah. It certainly seems like those lines of demarcation in some ways are always drawn. But back to our conversation with Vincent Magwenya, you spoke about the importance of this moment once the president is sworn in, what that means for the country's democracy. The new administration starts then, which also means we really don't have a cabinet anymore. When can we expect any kind of announcement insofar as that is concerned?
If I may piggyback on that, do you also lose your job or do you remain in your position?
Well, there is an administrative process that I need to undertake to transition from one term to the next because I'm contracted under what is called a term of office contract, which means I'm linked. My contract.
You
is
leave with the
linked to
president,
that
you come
of
with the president.
Yes. So there will be some administrative work that.
So
needs
you'll
to
be
done.
unemployed for a few minutes.
Well, we hope it's a few minutes.
It'll probably be a few minutes, but it's a very seamless and a very simple administrative process that will be undertaken.
All right, and the cabinet?
Well, the cabinet, I wish I could give you a timeline. What I could tell you is that the president does not want the country to go through a prolonged period of uncertainty about the cabinet. He has already started with the consultations. You will recall that, before the GNU, he will normally consult with governing party leaders. He will consult the leaders of the alliance. And thereafter, he will make up his mind and, make the appointments and announce cabinet. This time around, there's a small layer of complexity in that he has to consult with the various parties that form part of the government of national unity. And those consultations have been underway. They will continue. I think even tonight, when he leaves the luncheon, he will get on the phone, or there will be some meetings that he will host with a view that the consultations can be wrapped up as soon as possible and we can be in a position to announce his cabinet appointments.
Again, and we know the Constitution is silent in terms of, just how long he has
Thank
to
God.
do that. But it cannot be indefinite either.
Yeah, no, it cannot be indefinite. As I said, he has already indicated to us that he does not want the country to go through a prolonged period of uncertainty. So he wants to conclude the consultations as soon as possible and announce his cabinet appointments and get that cabinet going to the work and to the business of running the country and delivering to the needs of South Africans.
Yeah, without a doubt. And speaking about the work that needs to be done, I think many people are waiting for the cabinet not only to see the names and the confederation, of course, but to also kind of get a bit more clarity about what this means for how South Africa interacts with other countries, quite frankly, right? We know that a lot of that work is led by the executive in some ways, and at the very least, there's going to be a need for certainty, for clarity, interacting with the countries that are represented here. How top of mind is something like that, given this, what you describe as a small layer of complexity that we're dealing with?
Well, it is top of mind, but I think we should not be overly anxious about what I will refer to as radical changes to policy, because a lot of our policies, particularly our foreign policy, is very much rooted to our constitution. So whether it's from a human rights perspective, that is rooted in our constitution. We are lucky that we have very solid bilateral and multilateral sort of trade arrangements that are based on strong ties between South Africa and the various role players there. We are playing a very strong and meaningful role in various multilateral forums. So we don't foresee a lot of changes on that side of things. Domestically, the GNU is going to be guided by priorities. There are a set of priorities that are going to guide the work of the seventh administration. We have already witnessed the sort of constructive and positive spirit in which parties have already engaged with the process that has got us into the position of a GNU, and we certainly hope that spirit will be taken through the administration, particularly with making sure that we can sustain the government of national unity, we can deliver to the expectations of the country.
In terms of doing a SWOT analysis and going into this, what are the deal breakers when it comes to this government of national unity?
Well, interestingly enough, there aren't any issues that have been put on the table that are considered deal breakers. Instead, what has happened is this sort of overarching goal to take the country forward. There is an overall appreciation of where the country is now, the kind of challenges that the president inherited when he came in at the start of the 6th administration. The collaborative work that we've seen being done in the area of energy, the collaboration with different sectors of society during COVID, the collaboration that we are witnessing in the resolution of the logistics crisis. All of that work and that experience is going to be taken into the 7th administration. The reforms that were started in the 6th administration are beginning to bear fruit, and we will see more reforms that are aimed at accelerating economic growth and more importantly, creating the much needed jobs.
Right. And, at the time when Cyril Ramaphosa, for example, was starting his, first kind of term, there was a lot of optimism, and this is a conversation we've actually touched on initially. It felt like we're turning a new page. There was, a lot of kind of backing even from business South Africa around how Cyril Ramaphosa would conduct things. And if you were to count the matrix or consider the matrix, many people will tell you that it feels like we've regressed as opposed to going forward. I wonder how that positions you or positions the presidency as we begin this new administration too, right? I mean, whatever optimism existed, I'm sure has been depleted, dare I say, and there's going to be a need to ride on something else.
Well, we always look at the state of government, that state capture era. I think the legacy of state capture is still with us. We've done a lot of work to reverse it. The institutions that were broken have been rebuilt. You look at the NPA, for example. I think for the first time in many years, we have an NDPP that's going to serve her entire term. That hasn't happened for quite some time. If you look at the stability in the security cluster, and the results that we're seeing from there, if you look, for example, at how the police are responding to cash in transit robberies, that's because of the rebuilding that has taken place in the crime intelligence section of the police. You look at the setting up of the ID as a full-time division within the NPA and the kind of cases that are being brought to the courts there. So there's some recovery. One will admit and concede that some progress has been quite slow, and some of that progress has been undermined by events that are outside of our control, particularly the COVID pandemic, the riots, the floods. These are all events that have taken place in our country that have undermined the progress that we would like to have seen by now. Certainly the support from business is still there. We're working very closely with business on the energy side of things. The turnaround you've seen at Eskom is partly due to the skills that have been brought from the private sector, including the hard work that has been done by the men and women of Eskom. In logistics, we're collaborating and working very closely with business. And so we will understand where there's criticism with the speed of progress, but we've seen a great deal of progress. If you go through our Operation Vulindlela report, for example, you will see that we've made some headway on a number of areas, and we strongly believe that now, with this new administration, you'll start seeing real tangible fruits and results out of all of that work that was done in the 6th administration. The 6th administration, what is important about it, it was a rebuilding administration. A lot that the president inherited needed to be rebuilt.
What do you mean the president inherited, Mr. Magwenya? The president was part of the 5th administration. The president is part of the African National Congress. So be it the 1st administration, the 5th, the 7th, the 10th, if it's still the same party that is leading government, how then do you locate that what the president is doing outside of what has been done before by his party?
The president has been the first one to say there have been mishaps. There have been gross errors in the course of leading this country over the 30-year period. He's admitted to that. Indeed, he was part of the 5th administration as deputy president.
Indeed.
You and I know that deputy presidents have very limited powers. What is important is, what did he do when he got into the driving seat? Confronted with the challenges that confronted him at the beginning of the 6th administration, he set about to rebuild all of those institutions that had lost skills, that had lost leadership, that had been hugely affected by state capture. He set about on a path of reforms. We've seen the results coming out of those reforms. The launch of the Energy Action Plan. The Energy Action Plan was by far the very first real commitment towards resolving our energy crisis. 18, 19 months later, what do we have now? We're going through months of no load shedding whatsoever. Eskom has been fixed and is in the process of being fixed. Eskom is getting fixed. Eskom is getting fixed. You look at the board, you look at the management, you look at the units that are coming back online, you look at how Eskom is managing their maintenance schedules a lot better than they've done before. That's why we've not had load shedding.
Why didn't that happen? And let me challenge your sentiment around the Deputy President having limited powers, because the Deputy President, among others, is the head of government business. That is not a small role. You know, that's a very important role in terms of what he then gets to do, what he heads up. There was a war room for the Eskom situation and electricity. The then Deputy President was heading that up. Those were important roles in terms of how things ultimately panned out. If you look at the energy situation and how that has impacted on the South African economy, he was there. So why should we be optimistic that things are going to be different this time around?
I think if we reflect on the work of the sixth administration, we should be greatly optimistic, as I said, because that administration was a rebuilding sort of term or period. And now that we're done with that rebuilding, I mean, there's still some work that needs to be done.
There's a lot of work.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of work that needs to be done with respect to Transnet. Eskom is getting fixed, and I will say we're more than halfway there in getting Eskom completely fixed. We're dealing with, for example, the various syndicates that were operating in and around Eskom. That's why you're seeing a reduction of criminal activity around Eskom. And so we have a great deal to be optimistic about, because all of that work will now begin to bear tangible fruits.
It has to.
It has to.
And we certainly hope it does, right? Because South Africans have waited, actually, and have given the opportunity before. And I mentioned this the last time as well, that it feels like there were several corners where we could have turned, and we didn't. So hopefully that certainly does happen this time around. But Vincent Magwenya, thank you very much.
And we will, no, he will continue. A few minutes is all he'll be unemployed for, as the signs of from this paper to that one. So we'll speak to you again later, hopefully.
We'll speak again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Cheers.
Vincent Magwenya.
It seems like you know something we don't, Sakina, but we'll take it.